Welcome to another Panthers Classic interview. Today's travel back in time. We are going to look at the growth of the Ohio Dominican men's basketball program and a bond between two coaches that ultimately led to winning a GMAC tournament championship back in 2018. Today, we welcome in former Ohio Dominican head basketball coach Dan Evans and his then lead assistant Kelly Winter to tell the stories and give some insight as to what it took to win that title. Gentlemen, welcome to today's interview, and it's great to see the two of you back together again and having an opportunity to kind of tell these stories of how that all kind of took place. Just seems like a couple of years ago. Guys, thanks for being with us here today.
Thanks for having us, TB.
Thanks, TB.
Dan, I want to start with you. When you took over the program back in 2013-14, you had a couple of different assistants, and then that second season, you welcomed Kelly into the program. Tell me about hiring Kelly Winter and what you saw in him that you thought was going to fit with your program, or at least your ideas.
Well, we had hired him when we had the old staff, honestly, and the big thing for us was he was someone who was ambitious, highly intelligent, was from Columbus, so that's some of how we knew Kel, our old assistant Andy Winters, and Court Hamilton both knew Kelly very well through Capital, playing against him and coaching him. And so really Kelly and I are very different, and I think the personalities complement each other really well and allow us to have really a balanced approach, where he's not always going to agree with the ideas I had, and we were going to be able to have those conversations and really find what was best for our program, as opposed to just do what I thought we should do all the time. And obviously it played out in a manner that I was really happy with and proud of, and continues to do so today.
Kelly, what was your first impression when you met Dan, and why did you want to be a part of this program?
We met on the phone. What was that spring of 14 when I was out in Illinois? And I got a phone call from him because my GA ship was up, or my grad assistant term was up out there. And I remember talking to Dan on the phone multiple times, and I really believed the first thing that really impacted me, his vision for Ohio Dominican and what he was trying to do here. And I remember coming back to visit. I met him and Andy my very first day back, and we went out to lunch. I think it was Jimmy John's. I think we went to Jimmy John's right around the corner.
Yeah.
And he just continued to share that vision. And then what he just kind of spoke about, like the intelligence level and how he approached the game. And I could tell like his demeanor and what it meant to work and grind it out on a daily basis. Really stood out. And then he always talked about early, like he wanted a partnership in this. He wanted a guy with him for 3, 4, 5 years, and we were 4 together.
5.
And just all that really stood out. And I remember leaving the office my first time I met Dan and called my parents and saying, I really believe in what this guy is trying to do. And then probably soon after that, we made it official. So it was a early marriage. Like he said, we always didn't agree or see eye to eye, but I think that's healthy. That's a healthy conflict to challenge each other and challenge the program. And we saw the fruits of it 5 years later.
I can vividly remember sitting outside a Mexican restaurant on the north side of Columbus. I was eating with my family, and we had played phone tag the day that, it was clear we were going to kind of agree that you would come. And I remember standing and walking around the parking lot as my family ate with my in-laws and my wife, and just like, hey, you ready to do this? Are you ready to go to this together? And he was all in, and I was all in, and it was a good experience.
Dan, I know when you first took over this program, you kind of control might be the wrong word, but you really had your hands on a lot of what was going on in the day-to-day operations, the preparing for games, things of that nature. I know it took you a while to really start to trust all of the assistants that were around you. When did you kind of start to see in Kelly that, hey, I'm going to start delegating this to him or start delegating that to him?
I think it was our first year was a different experience, before Kel arrived. That was there was just a lot of work to be done, a lot of good people, but a lot of just effort that was going to go into doing what we needed to do and laying a foundation. And at the end of that first year, we ended up having a little bit of turnover, within the staff, or a complete turnover, frankly, within the staff. But it was a positive. I mean, I don't think it was always felt positive in the moment, or I wasn't overly pleased with some elements of it in the moment. But in the long run, it was the right stuff. And I think Kel and I had a lot of trust for each other because we were very much in the bunker from day one. He had been with us since May, but then we lost our lead assistant and he took that spot literally 3 or 4 days before everybody arrived on campus. And I think that sort of how abrupt that happened, that part of it, bonded us, and allowed us to make decisions and allowed us to set a course together that really freed us up to kind of have trust going both ways. And I'm certain that, I did things poorly that he was probably frustrated with, and I'm certain I was frustrated at times, with things that he did. But I do believe that we worked through that stuff pretty quickly, in the way of being willing to have that experience and give each other the rope and latitude to explore and experiment in some cases and really just see what was best.
And we got to the point where we just we knew when we were frustrated, there's a lot of probably nonverbal. We just knew, we knew each other really well. Yeah. Towards the end of it, we knew when someone walked in to the day of the office, this is going to be a bad day. We just had those, like a relationship, right? It was just, we knew when we clicked, when we didn't click, or we didn't see eye to eye. And we got to the point where we addressed it head on towards the end of our time. And it was the growth we had just over those 5 years, and still to this day is fantastic.
There has to be that trust, obviously, between the two of you. Kelly, when did you feel like you could really start to step in, make suggestions that you strongly believed in? And then what's it like when the coach maybe doesn't take your suggestion? How do you get over that? How do you build that trust in that relationship?
Yeah, I mean, the first year, every young coach, you define your voice. It takes a year to get terminology down, what we're trying to do offensively, defensively. Am I echoing the same things that the boss man's echoing? So you kind of learn when to speak up and find that voice. And he encouraged me from day one, but just my own comfort, confidence level. It takes time to know what you're teaching and how to teach it, make sure that we're on the same page and sharing the same message. So I'd say, I had, like Dan kind of said, I was thrown into the fire 3 or 4 days before guys got on campus. So I was forced to have that voice and give him suggestions and how to handle it if he didn't like it. That's just humility. We know we're trying to do the same thing. We have the same vision. We're on the same path. And if he makes a decision that's not mine, but it's the best decision for the group, it's my job to agree with that and promote it and serve it. So that was it's just a humble approach to everything you do. And you just got to get over yourself if he doesn't choose it, or vice versa. So it's, like I said, just humility is huge when you're an assistant coach.
One of the things that was unique about that time is that I was undergoing a philosophical switch offensively in particular from what I had played at, what I had coached at prior to that point, what we tried to teach, honestly, our first year. And so I think that approach was new to me, and it was new to Kelly. And so I think that gave us kind of a foundation where we were both, in a general sense, inexperienced with that style of play and teaching and coaching points. And I think our ability to manage that and work through that really gave us both sort of a blank slate. So neither of us was necessarily more experienced with it than the other. And that really allowed us, I think, to have kind of an equal share of that kind of learning experience. And I think because we both had that equal share, it really put us on the same plane quickly, you know what I mean? In a way that if we were doing all the things that I had just wanted to do and have been doing for 10 years, there's going to be sort of a hierarchy difference. But because of that sort of shift, it really leveled us out. And I think probably allowed us to grow in a way that Kel is describing.
And we were coaching and teaching 6 incoming freshmen that we knew were going to be a big part of this program. We had Trent and Chad and some good players already, but we knew we had 6 guys that were learning the same stuff we were learning at the same time. So I think that also helped, that we were all 8 or 9, that core group of that freshman class, I'm sure we'll speak about here shortly. We were all learning it and teaching it and getting to understand it all at the same time. So I think that kind of aids to what you're talking about as well, that we were all kind of in it together at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Kelly, because it transitions me right where I wanted to go next. I remember when we were together after the season was over, and Dan, I'll never forget this. It was like it clicked in your head. Oh my God, we have to come up with a new 5-year plan. So was it a 5-year plan? And what was that plan? And when did you guys kind of sit down, develop, and say, hey, this is, if we take it step by step, we can achieve this?
I mean, I think early on I had a plan, frankly, you know what I mean, of what we wanted to be. Now, I was 29 years old, my first head coaching job. So as much as I'd like to think about it now and think that it was this like preordained thing that we were always headed that direction, as you know, we all know, it's never that. But I do, you know, I had a vision of what I thought we needed to be, you know, from my time at Hillsdale, frankly, and as a player. And that vision for what it needed to be was more about who we had to be as people, what kind of qualities we needed to have, what kind of focus and work ethic we need to have, and not really about, hey, we need to play this way or that way. And I think my ability and subsequently our ability to remain focused on who we needed to be and what we needed to be more than as a more important foundation than how we needed to play, gave us some flexibility and allowed us to be sort of, just flexible enough in our teaching and in how we played to allow us.
And he always talked about the vision too. So you heard it out of his mouth. Like you knew he believed it, and it forced you to buy in and be invested. And he always spoke about it. So the fact that we heard him talk about it ad nauseum, truthfully, like it made us, okay, like this is what he wants to do. We know what he wants to do. So let's go do it. And, I mean, we definitely, it was spoke about, talked about, there's action behind it too. So it was believable, and we saw the fruits of it at the end.
With any plan, there's always going to be bumps in the road. Was there ever a time where you just wanted to tear up the whole plan and start over?
I don't know about tear up the whole plan. I wanted to do a lot of different things. Yeah, it was, it's hard. It's hard, you know, and we were taking over a program that, just didn't have a lot of tradition at that moment, you know, just didn't have a lot of foundation, and it just found itself in a rough spot. So I think in some ways the absence of all that made things easier because you weren't fighting any other habits, frankly, particularly when we got past year one and we just had so much turnover. But, you know, it's always nice to have a little bit more foundation to kind of start from a little bit higher level. But I mean, we went from 5 wins, I think, that first year to 9 to 11 to 14 to 17 to 20 or whatever the order, like, and we saw the gradual improvement. And even though in the moments we felt a lot of those little ups and downs, I think we also felt and could see like we are getting better. It wasn't easy. You didn't feel good in every moment, but I do think when we stepped away at the end of seasons, at breaks, at these moments, it was like, okay, we are better off. You know, we are making progress. We are getting to places where experiences like what we went through were possible, even if we still had work to do within the same season to get to where we wanted to go. We could see that it was possible.
One of my favorite things right now is direction's more important than speed. And we definitely knew that we were heading the right direction. And the fact that he never jumped ship, or he was pretty stubborn with his vision or with that direction. And the fact like he never was like, we got to scrap this whole thing. We're not good enough as quick as we wanted to be. Again, it made it just easy to follow his lead. And I think like that trickle down effect from him to me, to Ken Madison, to Ahmad Ajami, to Pat Soderman, to Hooley, to our play, that just trickled down to our players. And we knew we were on that trajectory to the right place.
And you mentioned, Dan, the growth and the wins every year. Were there a couple of moments, were there a couple of games, were there some moments in time where it reinforced what you guys were trying to do?
Yeah, I mean, without question, you know, we had some great games. I think we had some experience. I would even go beyond sort of winning and just like playing at a high level. You know, like we played well a couple of times at Findlay, and I think it like buoyed our sort of belief in what we're trying to do. We had some great battles early in the season with Ashland several times as the years went on, and even though we didn't always. We completed the job at some points, and at some points we kind of let them slip away. I do think those moments were big for us. I mean, in the season,
The game at
you know, in
Ferris,
17,
we lost
18.
the buzzer at Ferris.
Yep.
At Big Rapids High School. I think that was a big one because
Yep.
those guys were juniors that year.
Yeah, we played at Ferris at Big Rapids High School over what I think was their graduation, and we got beat at the buzzer in a game that we honestly had played really well and had done everything we needed to do. And the thing about that experience was twofold. One, we could show things specifically within the stretch run of the game that reminded our players of how important every little thing is. But the other part that was important is we were still on the road, went to Grand Valley and won at the buzzer with Mike Simon's buzzer beater, which I think was shown on your broadcast recently. And I think the fact that we could learn from it, but also bounce back and have the experience of beating a really good established program in Grand Valley was sort of a really key experience for us to understand that A, we're capable, you know, we're good enough to compete at a certain level, but B, to do that, no matter who we are, we have to do little things really, really well.
Moving into the 2017-2018 season, I think one of the biggest changes, and I want to get both of your perspective, the conference had obviously had a big change, or the teams within the GLIAC had a big change moving to a new conference, the GMAC. So now you don't have to beat your head against the door against those Ferris States, the Grand Valleys, playing all those much bigger, better funded state schools up in Michigan. And now you're in a conference of like-minded schools. Everybody's a smaller private school. In your mind, what did that do to change or boost your energy moving into that 2017-18 season?
I have to admit, I don't think it played much a role for me. It definitely was different in our schedule and our travel and some things like that. But the reality for us is like we had to beat the same teams to get to where we wanted to go. You know, in the GLIAC, we would call it a South Division title, right? You know, that's essentially what we needed to do as a foundational piece. And all those teams came with us, you know what I mean? And so it wasn't, I don't think, that different beyond some of the logistics, and some travel was a little bit easier and such. I think we were really hyper-focused on our seniors taking the lead and being the people and players that they could be. And I think we saw a lot of that already in the spring and summer and fall leading into the season. That gave us confidence. And I think I would have had that exact same confidence regardless of, you know, what our league situation was.
Yeah, you don't change your prep. You don't change your approach. You don't skip steps. So I think that stuff all remained true to us. And we were joining it. I mean, Kentucky Wesleyan, we were joining the GMAC. They were one of the best teams in the country for a stretch before. So it's not like we're joining a conference with a bunch of no names. I mean, they were good. Malone was getting really good at that time. Cedar, but I don't know if they were in that yet. They might have joined it with us, but they're a good program. And to win on the road at any level, it's hard. So it's not like we're still going to go to Ohio Valley, Davis, and Elkins at the time. AB, we're going to prepare and do the same things for them that we're doing if we're going to Grand Valley or going up to Big Rapids or you name the GLIAC school. So in our minds, I don't think our approach changed and our preparation changed, but there might have been a peace of mind with our players or their senior class that we're talking about. Maybe I don't know, but from the staff standpoint, you can't change your approach based on a change of landscape.
I don't think we missed the bus ride that crosses
no
the bridge necessarily, but other than that, you know, it was not much different.
Yeah, spending an extra couple of days with you guys cramped up in a bus in a hotel, I didn't miss that at all, just so you're aware of that.
You did miss that.
I'm sure you did.
So you had mentioned you could see it, that nucleus that you had built, this group of seniors you've referenced now a couple of times. You could see it in the summertime, in the fall, leading up to the season. Give me some examples of why you thought that group was going to be able to take you to where you wanted to get to.
I think there are just the length of time they all remain committed to what we were trying to do. You know, in our sport, especially in this day and age, it's not all that common for people to be willing to spend 4 or 5 years at a place and work and get better and better and better. And I think, I'm sure those guys had influences outside of our program and outside of themselves that may have tugged them in different directions. But you know, the fact that they were willing to continue to stay committed to what we were trying to do, and all of them came at it from a different place. You know, some of them got opportunity right away. You know, Shamar and Ronnie and Mike DeLeon and Adam Sitlak, like they were playing very quickly upon arriving. and then you had someone like Alex Stevens, or even in the younger class, Ryan Hoying, who had to wait a little bit, whether it was, coach's decision to wait, or it was health that caused him to wait, or, Hassan Barons had a red shirt. I mean, you had a group of people that all were coming at it from different places, both in their own lives and in their opportunity within the program. And they all, I thought, were working in the right manner. And I think Shamar Waugh made a big transformation, frankly, I think from kind of midway through his junior year to and he just really rededicated himself in a way that is not normal for people, which is really difficult. And I think the level of work he put in was a great example for other people. And I think we had a variety of guys who were already working, frankly, at a really good level. And so the kind of combination of those things and our ability to overcome some, adversity within the season itself, kind of all became a confluence of events to allow us to really get on a roll.
Yeah, I think there's a maturation. You mentioned Shamar. There's a mental maturation and a physical one. I think you saw Shamar physically in the gym a lot more often. There's an emotional and mental maturation, I think, to Ronnie and Shamar. And I even think Michael DeLeon to an extent. Like, those guys had to buy into a different role midway through that senior year, Ronnie and Mike DeLeon specifically. And I think that, coupled with, I think there was some reality like, hey, guys, we have a month and a half of basketball guaranteed to us. So at that point, they were just willing to do whatever it took to keep playing basketball, to make this senior season as memorable as possible. And I think those two guys making that shift from starters for three and a half years, now coming off the bench, I think that was a huge part. And the whole team saw, like, these guys, one's a 1,000-point scorer, one started probably 90 games in his career. To see those guys selflessly go to the bench and accept that role, I think it was huge for us.
I think what Kel's talking about is really important, because the foundation of those seniors and what they brought to us was almost as much their willingness to take a step back. Michael DeLeon's role was diminished in terms of minutes and profile in some ways because he wasn't starting. Ronnie, the same thing. Shamar sat more than is typical because Michael Scott was beginning to play really well. Adam Sitlak sat more, and really those guys had set a foundation to allow Ryan Hoying, Hassan Barron, Sam Hickey, and Mike Scott and Ben Casanova to sort of step forward. And that combination is ultimately what and people accepting that reality and embracing that reality is really what allowed us to, I think, play at our highest level.
And what the two of you are referencing is basically a midway point in the season where, after a January 8th loss to Cedarville, you're sitting at 7-8 and 2-6 in the conference. I don't know if you had an actual expectation or a win total or what you thought before the season started, but something tells me that 15 games in, 7-8 wasn't exactly what you had in mind.
No, we had I'll reference Michael Jordan's Last Dance. We had a behind closed doors meeting around the New Year's. And I think that meeting had a lot to do with our change of trajectory, how the season went. I don't know if you want to get into the details of that meeting, but there was a behind the doors meeting that we all had. And I think it was season changing, and I think sparked life into, I think, that senior class specifically.
I think it was after we played Malone at Malone. And we, because the thing was, we were 2-6 and 7-8, but like we weren't. It wasn't like we were a mess. We couldn't quite get over the hump. We couldn't quite finish off some games. We had played well at times, particularly at the Thanksgiving time. Beating, really dominating a game against Purdue Northwest and really handling Lewis at both games were at Hillsdale. And so it wasn't that we didn't have the ability, but we were just kind of wrapped up in our own stuff. All of us, coaches and players alike, wrapped up in our own stuff and our own anxieties and our own selfish intentions that we all carry as human beings. And I think that Malone game was a Saturday, and on that Sunday, we literally got into the black and gold room and shut the doors. And it was long. And while I won't get into any detail of what was talked about, it was a totally open forum for everybody to express their frustrations and what, quite frankly, like, what's your problem? You know what I mean? What's the problem for all of us? And we literally went around the room. And I think it open people's eyes up to like, hey, we're all worrying about things that aren't that important on one level. And on the other level, like the things that are important, we need to be able to speak on and hold each other to. Mm-hmm. And really from that point forward, the Cedarville game was literally that week. The environment we were in, which was always fine and good, it was different. Our sense of purpose was different. Our why was a little bit more clear. And you could see it. I mean, you could see it in the way we played, I think, going forward.
After that loss to Cedarville, it was a quick trip down to West Virginia, beat Davis and Elkins. Really tough loss against Alderson Broadus, lose by 2, had 3 chances to score late. There was a issue trying to get out of the parking lot with the bus. We had to do some bus repairs. We won't go completely down that path, but it hasn't clicked right away after you had that closed door meeting. You've had a couple of tough losses right after that. But I looked then when things started to turn, I thought you had 2 very important wins. One was a home double overtime win against Walsh, where Shamar hits the game winner at the buzzer. And then when you turn right back around and you head down to Trevecca and Kentucky Wesleyan, a game you're down a bunch late to Trevecca, you come back, you force overtime, and then you win overtime. The importance of those 2 overtime games, is it something you've thought about or can point to that really helped you then close the season out by going 10-2?
I think it was big that we were able to complete those games because, when you talk about, the Cedarville game was a very close game, and they had a senior really make some plays on us that, there was nobody did something wrong. The young man just made some really nice plays. And so I think everybody walked off that floor feeling like, man, we should have won. The Alderson Broadus game, very much that way. We had a very good opportunity late to take the lead, and probably win the game. And it just didn't quite go for us. And then we got beat in overtime. And it was like, doesn't feel good to go in that locker room. But I think we could all sense like these are 1-2 possession moments where if we can just be a little better and a little more focused, a little more in the moment, big changes were possible. And then to have those same scenarios, Walsh and Trevecca, and be able to complete them, I think it was very much a validation of the things that we had been talking about, and that our players, to their credit, were buying into. And so to have that validation, and even though we played really poorly and were quite frankly exhausted when we got to Kentucky Wesleyan on that Saturday, you could feel that we believed in the level of play we could achieve, and we believed that we could beat anybody, frankly. And honestly, we believed night to night we could be good. And there's a difference between being good night to night and being good in a moment. And I think the fact that we were able to complete those games, in both were very dramatic, with buzzer beaters, one to win and one to put it to overtime. I think it just brings you together. Just brings you together even more.
And we had Lake Erie in overtime the week after that, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a heck of a stretch for us. That I think, if we don't go through those moments, that the losing moments to the winning moments, I don't think we probably had the same outcome in those 3 overtime games that we were on the victorious side on.
So you guys mentioned that you had to make some changes. You talked what Mike DeLeon and Ronnie Williams meant to the season in kind of lessening some of their time or changing their roles a little bit. And as I said before, you close out 10-2. You ended up finishing 4th in the GMAC at a tie with Malone, but because they had beaten ODU earlier in the season, they ended up being officially 4th and ODU 5th. Now you're into a GMAC tournament, and now this is something completely new for everybody. First time the men's program had made a postseason tournament in the Division II era. What's the mindset? What's the coaching points? What are you guys thinking about now moving into that weekend where ultimately to win the championship you have to play 3 games in less than 48 hours?
I think we were really focused on being better than Malone in that day, honestly. I think Kelly will remember we had an experience, him and I, standing in the hallway of the office, or I was kind of in his doorway. And I would say it was probably the early part of February, if not the very latter part of January. And we talked about, and I said to him, we are good enough to be the best team in this league with the way we're playing right now and with what the things we were doing right now. And I think we didn't really talk in that way to our players in a broad sense. We really were just focused on the preparation of that game and of playing well enough in that environment to move on. And, the same things we had been doing up to that point were going to matter in that point. or in that moment. And I think Kelly and Patrick and Hooley and our staff did a great job of getting our guys ready, to play at a high level.
You're playing in a neutral site against an opponent with the stands aren't very full. There's not a lot of people there. So atmosphere wise, or just preparing for Malone, again, a team you had lost to way back earlier in the season. Did you think the guys were going to be able to perform going onto that stage?
Yeah, I was not worried. Honestly, I was not worried about that element of it. We had not played very well against Malone, and we switched up a little bit of our preparation for them strictly to get like a different set of eyes, and I do think this sort of new perspective helped us in that game and ultimately helped us in the next game because we sort of flipped the scouts. And I do think the sort of freshness that both sets of eyes brought to each of those games, I don't think there was any concern about our ability to play at a high level or, frankly, our ability to be up for the moment.
And I think our senior class was tethered to that first Malone game. So I think there was some revenge built in there somewhere just because what we already spoke about. I think that was still tethered to them emotionally, and they wanted to kind of rid themselves of it. So I think that had some part of it. And then him and his wife were welcoming their daughter in the world as well. So I think there was something else to play for as well. Like he didn't show up to the ceremonies the night before. So like he was going through a big life happening, and there's just a lot going on. And I think that also fueled what we were trying to do, truthfully.
I think what's interesting about this is we were so happy to get to the tournament. At least those are your supports, your people around the program. We were so happy to get to the tournament. Then you win that game against Malone, and you're like, oh my gosh, we've won a conference tournament game. But in that format, playing Thursday, Friday, Saturday, you guys, I remember in the little meeting in the hotel afterwards, you said, enjoy this for a couple of hours, but then we have to forget about it because you have obviously the daunting task of playing Findlay, the number one team in the conference, the regular season champion, on their floor, a place where they never lose. The preparation in such a short period of time, obviously it's easier because you played them twice, but how did you guys move everybody forward after that win against Malone?
We were the last game. So we were the late game of the quarterfinals. And so by the time we got back to the bus and got back to the hotel, I mean, it was well after 11 o'clock. I was, if I'm not mistaken,
we had a food issue too. There was something happening on the bus.
We were delayed.
The bus wouldn't start or something. I
think that was the Findlay game. I think that was that.
Oh, that's Findlay. Okay.
Okay. But we had post game. We brought it back to the hotel. We met, I think, at midnight. And we literally, I have to admit, like I would say we were not back in the hotel longer than maybe a half hour, maybe 45 minutes. And we had our Findlay scout, we had our film queued up, and we went through the exact same routine we would the day before or night before any other game, quite honestly. And I do think the fact that when we got out of that meeting at, I'm guessing it was 12:30, 12:45, like everybody's pretty exhausted by that point. It lets everybody kind of settle in because the excitement of winning, and really we played very well against Malone. It kind of washed that all away. It flushed our system so that when they walked out of that room, no offense, like they're yawning, they're tired, they're ready to settle in. Whereas if we'd waited till the next morning or we'd done something, you get some lag to it. So when those guys went to bed, and I know when we went to bed, which was well after that, I think we felt over the Malone experience, frankly. I think we felt like we're back into what we need to do. And we were hyper-focused on playing 40 minutes well. And if we needed to play more, we would have. But, playing it well and knowing that all the other things that happened before, both in that day, in the year, in the traditions of our programs, it really doesn't mean anything. You're playing the team that's sitting on the bench across from you, and that's it. That's all that you're playing.
You were playing a Findlay team that you had mentioned you'd had some good games with in the past couple of years. That season, a home blowout loss to them, but you played a very tough game against them in the middle portion of the season where you're down by 3 with 90 seconds to go. Between that and the fact that you're playing so well, I saw an air of confidence about your team going into that Findlay game that I had never seen before. At least me personally going in knew we had a legitimate shot to win that game. What was your feeling? What did you see in the players' eyes going into that Findlay game?
I mean, I do think there was a high sense of belief. I don't think there was any sense like, hey, we're definitely going to win, or this is going to be easy, as we all know, or anything like that. But I do think there was no fear. I think there was a healthy amount of respect, but we were not in awe of anything. We'd been in that environment enough, meaning, their gym, when they're a very decorated program. Truthfully, I found myself thinking a lot about those seniors when they were freshmen, and we had hit a little bit of adversity in the middle of January and caused some changes in our program. And the very next game we played after those major changes, we started 3 or 4 of those kids as freshmen against Findlay when they were a top 25 team, and we beat them, and it was the first time we'd beat them. And so I found myself honestly in quiet moments, in my hotel room with Hooley, thinking about the sort of bookending of their experience in a way. But I think our guys were ready. I don't think we needed to say much, frankly, at that point. I think they were ready.
And we've played well at Croy. That senior class has had a couple good games at Croy. So I feel like they had a little we're right there. Like we're gonna get it done this time, or we're gonna get the job done, not just keep saying we were down 3 with 30 or 90 seconds. There was some okay, we're gonna get it done this time. And I think that belief was there, no doubt about it.
For the two of you, during the course of that Findlay game, are there a couple of instances or moments in time outside of a couple of big threes made down the stretch and then a steal and a layup that really come to mind about that game? Like, Dan, I don't know, maybe you getting a technical out of nowhere that you didn't need to get.
Shade. I'll shade right there.
I don't.
A lot of shade.
I'm not sure what you're talking about. I just remember the sort of resilience that I felt our players had when we hit a little bit of a rough patch. We went down double figures at some point, near the end of the half or into the early second half. And the thing that I remember vividly is not feeling any change in who our players were and what they were trying to accomplish. And one of the big reasons Croy has such a mystique for people is that when you hit that point, it's very easy for it to go from 10 to 30, you know what I mean? Or 10 to 25 or 10 to 19. And we have certainly been a victim of that. And I have been a victim as a head coach and an assistant coach of those moments. And this was one of the few times in that environment where we didn't change, our players didn't change. And I think that coupled with, Sam and Ronnie and Michael De Leon really making some plays and asserting themselves, and Hassan making asserting themselves a little bit more. We were still us, even though it was choppy in that moment, and that's really what I remember, about the kind of buildup at least.
Yep.
Locker room scene afterwards. The big play happens. Ryan Hoying steals the ball. Michael Scott makes the layup. You win the game. There's a dog pile in the middle of the floor. The crowd is chanting ODU as you're going to the locker room. The team comes back. You're celebrating with players. Then you get to the locker room. Take me behind the scenes there, and then how you guys were able to put that one behind you and now know that you got to play a championship game on Saturday.
It's funny you brought that up because we were talking about this last night. I don't remember the locker room after the game. I asked Dan, do you remember? He remembers. He'll talk about what he said and our approach moving forward. But specific moments and I don't recall even probably I don't even remember going down to the locker room after. I couldn't remember going down there and leaving. So I kind of blacked out during that whole thing. So
it was just such a special experience. You know what I mean? Obviously the way it happened was so abrupt. We had fought our butt off. Mm-hmm. And then we gave up a couple buckets in a row to go down 64-60. And then we fouled and they made a free throw and it's man, and then they missed the second and we don't rebound it. And then we foul, a 90 some odd % free throw shooter. And it's man, feels like, man, we had this. And that 90% free throw shooter misses the front end. And literally from that point, where it was maybe 25 to 30 seconds left, it was we dominated every play. We made a really nice pass. Hassan makes a 3. We make we get a front end foul. They make 1 of 2 or miss the front end, and we come back down. And Ronnie hits an absolutely filthy 3 right in front of our bench. And then it was all those feelings and validations I was just talking about, we had right in front of us. And even then, you're still, you're on the road at Findlay and Terrence Sullivan's on the other side. And it's not exactly a comfortable feeling. But for Hoying to make the play and Michael Scott to make the finish, Hoying both the steal as well as the pass,
right,
and Mike Scott to have the presence of mind to cut and then finish over, a really difficult scenario, it happened very, very quickly. And I think the pile up in the middle of the floor, the sort of energy of our fans and supporters and their belief in us and their excitement for this experience, both for themselves, I hope, and for our players, I think it spilled over, frankly. And I'm sure we probably overdid it a little bit in that moment, but it just was like a release. And, I think we stayed out on the floor probably a little longer than we would, like to, but it was just delirium, and it happened so quickly. And then we got down there, and I have to admit, my memory is of us being incredibly joyous, obviously, but really saying, like, we didn't come here to beat Finland. Like, we didn't come here, we didn't join, or we didn't, our focus was not on beating this team in their gym. Our focus was really on winning 3 games. And so I think similar to that scouting report session the night before, I think when we walked out of that locker room, we were really excited. But we were ready. You know what I mean? I think we were mentally new. We had more at stake. Our bus got delayed because we couldn't get it started. And we were having to sort of consider alternate options of getting back to the hotel. And so we had some of these different things. But I think the reality is we knew who we were about to play. And I think for our players and our staff, we felt very confident in our approach against Hillsdale. And I think we felt confident in our ability to play at a high level against them. And I certainly think that that brought a lot of comfort to people that evening as we got into the prep.
So like the night before, guys, you're back to the hotel, you're celebrating Findlay, but now you've got to turn your attentions to a championship game. And Dan, for yourself personally, as Kelly had mentioned earlier that week on Tuesday, you had your second child with you and your wife, Amy. How are you personally handling all of this, knowing that probably in your mind, I want to be home with my wife and with my baby, but here I am in a hotel in Findlay, Ohio, getting ready to play a championship game?
It was unique. My wife's a trooper. And so, my week was very different. We went into an appointment on that Tuesday morning, and the doctor pretty much said you have to go to the hospital. And so we were all ready with our prep, but I literally called Kelly and said, hey man, you got this. And we knew this was possible, obviously, but you got this. And I think I came to practice on Wednesday and just sat and watched. And then they all got on the bus and I went back to the hospital, and I was really slept in the hospital, spent all my time in the hospital till Thursday morning at, maybe 7 a.m. when my father-in-law picked me up and drove me to Findlay, Ohio. And I think I went to the hotel and then we did a walkthrough. And so it was all pretty much a blur for me leading up to it. But I have to admit, once I woke up from a nice nap, frankly, on Thursday during the day before our late tip, it was pretty normal. And it was normal largely because my wife and my family is incredibly understanding and obviously wonderful and very capable of taking care of themselves, of course. And so I was really hyper-focused. And even though Aim and I spoke constantly and FaceTimed and all that stuff, it was really business as usual for us. It didn't really interact a lot with what we were trying to do. And a lot of that was what we have referred to as just our familiarity. Our familiarity in particular with Hillsdale and Findlay, as it turns out. There, in a weird way, it was more about reminding and making maybe subtle tweaks to what we were trying to do than it was about digging into more film or getting more. I mean, we were just very familiar with all these people, and so it let me do both, and it was a really cool thing, for my daughter to be born happy and healthy, and then frankly, the Findlay people were incredibly kind to my family and gave Amy and the baby girl, my mother-in-law, a spot that was kind of like protected from sort of general traffic Given that she was about 4 days old and just like the size of a bean.
Well, that was the thing that one of the things that will always be a lasting image for me was up in my little broadcast perch in the top of Croy Gymnasium and looking to my right and watching Amy walking in with this baby carrier. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, they are here. And it just, I will never, ever forget that. And really the emotion for me, knowing that they were able to be there at that championship game that day.
Very much so. I mean, it was unique. I think it was unique for a lot of reasons, some of which we may get into. But I mean, the reality of they hadn't been to either of the other games. You know what I mean? For obvious reasons. And my wife was just very adamant that like she wanted to be there. And our administration, Jeff and Sandy, both helped with communication with Finley, and their people were tremendous about carving out that space, which was much appreciated. And truthfully, those folks all did it. I didn't really have any it didn't take anything and any life in my prep. But some of that also was tied into who we were playing, and my connection to them. And, very much, obviously my wife and children are my family and my extended family, but, the coach of the other team was very much a family member and ultimately the godfather of that baby girl. And so, that certainly played a large role in my own emotion and my own kind of excitement for the moment.
So you're getting ready to play Hillsdale in this championship game. The 2 games during the season against Hillsdale, lost an 11-point lead at home to Hillsdale and probably had a bad taste in your mouth after losing that game. But then playing them the second time around, winning 65-48 in a game that really, in my recollection, was never in doubt. You hold Hillsdale to only 20 points in the second half of that game. What was it about? Was it just that particular ODU team against that particular Hillsdale team? Or what was it that it just seemed like that even though Hillsdale had a better record, they had beaten better teams than us, but we seemed like the better team against Hillsdale that year?
I think at that point in the season, I think we were better. I think when you look at the first half of the season, they were a better team than us. They were more consistent, certainly over the course of the season. But we had just grown into a far different team than we were early in the year. And so we, I think, had a very good game plan, led by Kelly, frankly, that we had sort of developed the year prior. Or earlier that year. I can't remember exactly when we started implementing it. But it really gave our guys a lot more certainty. It allowed us to be more aggressive in a lot of different areas and also smarter in some other areas. Gave us some diversity in the way we played. And I really just think our guys believed we were better at that time. And that power of – I truthfully think when we played them at their place and kind of blew that game, that was one of those moments that we spoke about earlier that kind of was like, man, like we got to find a way to get over that hump. But I don't think – I think we all felt this is a pretty good matchup for us, and we were very comfortable in it.
Yeah. And then talk about you mentioned like when we prepped for Hillsdale the night before, we didn't dive. Dan talked about we didn't dive in a lot of film. I remember that was like one scouting report where our players are almost like reminding us, here's what we do here. Here's how we guard this. Here's how we guard this guy. And I remember like that was one scouting report. Like everyone is involved, communicating. Like they're almost telling us what we're doing. It's like I think that was the level of confidence and familiarity we had against Hillsdale specifically. And that was pretty cool. I remember seeing Mike Scott scout, had notes all over, and guys were taking notes and reminding us and telling us how we're doing things and bringing questions up that they were never asked the first time around. So I just think the confidence after, especially a night like Finley, going in and know who we're playing, it was like the perfect storm pretty much.
Was it, Kelly, the Hillsdale game, or was it the Finley game where you couldn't find your scouting report and you had to borrow one of the players' scouting reports?
That was prior to the Hillsdale game. And I got Scott's and it had notes and everything just all over it, which is pretty cool.
Why did you lose your scouting report?
I'll blame Holy.
The blame goes down the ladder, right? It just trickles on down. Find the guy below you and blame that guy. The game itself, obviously, now we're back to kind of a weird atmosphere. It's just Hillsdale fans. It's just ODU fans. It's certainly not packed, but riding off the emotion the night before, getting off to a pretty good start in that game against Hillsdale. And I think you could see it. Hillsdale, they weren't going to win that game that particular day. Can you think back to that first half or pre-game, or as that game is going on, both of you maybe reflect back on some things that happened in that game where you went, we're really going to win this championship?
I have to admit, I think, you have to play the game, and there's not a lot of sort of like overconfidence that exists. But we had played so many games against them, and I've always felt since even the day I arrived at Ohio Dominican, like when we played them, and I think their program would echo this, like they were very intense games, even when we weren't very good, and as we got better, I think that only grew. I mean, we played so many heated and tight and like chippy, and like, Coach and I think are both pretty competitive. And there was a lot of emotion tied to those games all the time. And yet I think the night before, in the warm-up, in the walkthrough, in the lead-up, we had a looseness to us that I think would belie our confidence. I mean, I think we had a sense that our guys really believed, and I don't think we knew we would win. I don't think that's a fair way to term it, but I think we were really confident in the level that we were going to play at. And I think when you got into, it was more competitive early than I think I remembered. It was like 12-8, but really we were playing faster than them, and we were anticipating a little bit better than them. And I think we were just really settled in who we were at that point and what we were doing. And I would say by the middle of the late part of the first half, like we were in firm control. And really, with the exception of an early little stretch in the second half, like we just controlled. We controlled the pace. We controlled what they were able to do. We didn't give up really anything easy, and we made some plays. And when you put those things together, like I think that sense of belief carried throughout.
Yeah, I think that looseness you're talking about. We always had a confident group, but like the swagger that day, we walked a little differently. We talked like the guys just had a different step to them. The way they communicated pregame was different. So that was one thing that really stood out to me. And then I think early in that game, I think Dan just mentioned, like the way we were guarding and moving around, like they airballed or they were front rim on so many. I think they had tired legs, but I think we disrupted and took them out of rhythm, I think, early in the game. And I think after, like, we watched it last night, and we like the amount of like shots, they didn't hit anything. I think that was a credit to what we were doing. And then I just think after that, then they burned like 2-3 timeouts really early. And I think just after that, it gave the guys a lot of confidence and more juice and swagger, just to carry that on to the second half.
Yeah, you talk about the swagger, the confidence, the looseness. I remember watching the team come back to the hotel after your morning shoot around that morning. And then a little bit later on, I got a call from my father saying, "So what do you think?" And I said, "Well, we're not tight." And and I really just felt like, going into it, that, as you guys were saying, there was a different feel about the team, certainly that day. Kelly, as an assistant coach, you're kind of around the players up and down the bench and maybe hear a little bit more about what they say throughout the course of a game. The head coach is more focused on, what's going on the floor sometimes. Did you hear the players saying anything during that game, maybe even in the second half when it was very apparent that we were going to win that championship that day? Anything that you remember coming from the bench?
Specifically, no. I think that was the year Simon was injured, so I always made Mike Simon sit right next to me towards the end of the year. I remember it was always – I can't remember on the front of the bench. It was Hooley, me, Pat, or Dan, and then Pat, and then me. And then I always made Simon sit next to me. So I always had heard things Simon was saying. But no, just there was everything was like basketball talk that game. Like it was different. Like everything was about what was happening on the floor and encouragement and talking about the game. And like I remember just feeling like everyone 1 through 16 is all about what's going on right now, and just I just felt like that was one time that like everyone was talking the game of basketball on the floor and picking each other up and talking about like talking solutions and talking what they're seeing. So I just remember hearing that like through Simon, but nothing specifically stood out. It's like, okay, our guys have the confidence in terms of like moment in the game. It's like, okay, but nothing specifically comes to my mind.
Any point, Dan, where you realized that there was no – you guys are coaching all the way down to the final buzzer. You could be up 20 and you're trying to figure out a way not to lose a game. But was there a moment that did you just really let yourself think, oh my gosh, we won this thing?
It was actually really late for me because I was a bit paranoid, really, because we got to the middle of the second half and like we were up 16, 18, 20. But Hillsdale's just so tough, and they're just so like they just keep coming. You know what I mean? They just keep coming. They're just going to keep doing their thing, and they picked up their energy a little bit and picked up their full court pressure. We made a couple mistakes, and I probably more than anybody else, to be truthful, and not that it's totally logical, was like really worried. I was really worried at that point. We had a moment where we broke the press maybe with 90 seconds left. And we finished a play. We got an and one, or Hassan dunked it or something. Mm-hmm. And I remember being kind of more up toward the hash near midcourt, where we're allowed to be. And I remember turning back and like looking, and our bench was celebrating. And I remember looking and seeing our assistants kind of were all toward the front of the bench at that point. And it was a moment where I was like, this thing's over. And in that, if you can picture that view, so I'm looking down, I can see Hools, then Patrick, then Kel, then Simon, and then the bench behind them. And then as I'm like scanning and just honestly feeling really good, I'm getting chills right now just thinking about it. Right above it was AIM, and
right.
It was pretty cool.
Did it mean more to you, Dan, personally, to beat Hillsdale in the championship game? And can you tell me if there was any kind of interchange between you and your former predecessor on that Hillsdale bench when the game was over in the handshake line?
It meant a lot to win, to be honest. I think the fact that it was Hillsdale was pretty cool, but also harder in a way. As I've talked about, I have so much respect for Coach, and he's just so close to me that, like, if he could have got beat by somebody else and then we beat somebody else, I would have been really, really happy. To be quite so gut-wrenching, I think, for both of us. And we did. We shared a moment, but nothing magical. Honestly, we had a moment the night before, a little text exchange, that was, I think, really special for both of us. And, at that point, like, I think he was just happy for us, and I was obviously very happy for us. And so it was special to do it in that environment against them. I think was special, even if it probably made it a little bit harder.
Post-game ceremony, you guys are getting your plaques, you're cutting down nets. Kelly, you blanked out after the Finley game. Do you at least remember cutting down the net after the game against Hillsdale?
I remember that, yeah, and I remember not being in the pictures. I think I was down in the locker room I don't remember who I was down in the locker room with. And
he disappeared.
There was pictures taken without me, and I think someone called me and said, "Hey, get back up here." So I remember that after Hillsdale.
He disappeared. We couldn't find him. We had cut stuff down. We had gotten little plaques, and people were sort of milling around and taking pictures. And you were doing interviews up in the crow's nest up there, and we couldn't find Kelly. We have literally nice pictures, and he's just not in them. He disappeared. And I just remember the pandemonium.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like everything that happened the night before.
Supporters, boosters, like family. It was just
the
baseball guys that came up, Andy White and his whole crew. Mm-hmm. I remember some former coaches that helped us out were there. It was just really, really neat. Yeah. Really neat.
Is it to almost tie this all together, you go back to you guys sat down so many years before that, had a vision, had a plan, and to go, holy crap, it worked.
It's cool. You never talk about you want to win a championship always, yes, but it's never talked about. Our goal was never to we never put up we got conference championship is our destination, but to know we wanted to get there and the vision. And I'm sure we shared some moments, Dan and I did, and afterwards, and even since then. But
we got downstairs, and we and the locker room in Finland's pretty tight. You know what I mean? It's a small space to all be in one area at least. There's some doors that lead you to showers and such, but it's a tight space. And we were all down there. We were kind of like, hey, is everybody here? And we were counting, and they're like, oh no, we're missing a couple people. And a couple people we were missing are, the players that you would expect to be sort of just straggling and, just out and about. And literally, right after we said that, we're kind of chuckling because somebody made a joke, you know what I mean? And those two guys come right behind me and just dump this Gatorade jug full of water all over my suit. And it goes all over the floor because it's not a very big area. And everybody's standing in the water. And we're just delirious. I felt that way. It was just amazing. And we literally loaded up the bus. And I remember riding the bus over to that restaurant in downtown
Legends,
Findlay.
Maybe Legends or whatever it's called.
Whatever it's called. It's a nice place. And we had somebody had organized, one of the parents had organized this the longest table you've ever seen. And literally like everybody that was able to in our program went and ate dinner. And it was like players, lots, I don't know about all families, but lots of families. My brother-in-law was there. We had, I mean, it was just like, and I remember riding the bus there and then getting off the bus was like one of those moments where it was like, man, we actually this happened. We did this. We as a group accomplished this. And then we got to sit there and eat and just kind of hang out. And then I thought again when we got back on the bus, because the bus ride from there was actually pretty, I think people were exhausted. Yeah. It wasn't like crazy. I think people were excited and the trophy was floating around, but it wasn't like nuts. But I think it was like, man, we did this.
And I think when we got back, I think Antonides and Coach Hall, I think we're waiting there at school, like for us to get off the bus. So a couple of people were at school waiting for us. And I believe that's accurate. Right. And that was also really cool. Just the support from the people that came. And then when we arrived back on campus, there were a couple folks there that made it really special.
To win a championship like that, it makes the bonds so much tighter and so much closer. Certainly you can always have reunions with coaches and players, but now you actually have a moment in time and you can have a 5-year, a 10-year, 20 years on down the road, get this group of people back together and always talk about stories such like this. The feeling of accomplishment just, must be through the roof.
Very much so. And I think the fact that where we had come from, was a big part of that. It's never easy. It really isn't. But I think for all of us to have seen what we players especially built, you know what I mean? And that journey, I certainly think made it even that much more special. And I think the diversity of our team and the sort of eclectic nature of our roster and staff also kind of like contributes to that. Everybody's moved on to do what they're doing. But it was just a culmination of a lot of things beyond just, we're playing at a high level.
Right. And then kind of what you talked about, Todd Bell, like that moment, that was in life and sports, there's always another challenge. Like you're never at your destination, but for that night, it finally felt like, like even though our vision was bigger and it's not about like single, but like that night, it was like, okay, this is what it feels like to arrive or get to our destination that we were trying to get to. For that one night, it felt like, okay, like what we did or what Dan started 6 years ago, and then where we are now, like we finally are at that place. And that was like one moment that you can because there's always another challenge, always another hill to climb. But like that one moment, it was pretty unique, and not a lot of people, truthfully, don't get to experience that.
With the two of you sitting next to each other, Kelly, you're now the head coach here at Ohio Dominican. Coach Evans, you've moved on, coaching now at North Georgia. Kelly, I want to start with you first. Getting the head coaching job here at Ohio Dominican, the years as an assistant under Dan, how much did you learn? How important was that? And what now translate into what you're trying to accomplish here at ODU?
Yeah, it was huge. The fact that Dan laid that foundation. Obviously, each guy does things a little differently, but all the legwork and hard work. There's always hard work to it. Like he did the legwork 6 years prior to bring our program to a place that we've never experienced before. And he created a floor like that. This is how we operate. This is how we do things. So, I mean, that floor was raised in his 6 years here. Obviously you've been around. So he created that foundation, created that base. And it's my job to honor him and what he did, to continue to try to build that. But it's been fun to kind of pull what he did and still put my twist on it and remove stuff that he had in place and do my own thing. So that's been so much fun. I still call him frequently. We still text a ton, and I can't thank him enough for giving me that opportunity as an assistant, and then ultimately giving me the opportunity to get the head coaching job.
Dan, the importance of someone that was on your staff and taking over the reins of what Kelly had just said, the foundation you had built, as opposed to a quote unquote outsider that would have maybe come in and taken over this job.
I mean, I was pretty adamant from the moment it was kind of clear that I wasn't going to be back, with the people I'm allowed to speak to, with what I thought should happen. Kelly was as much a part of us building as I was, so I don't feel any sort of personal pride, but I feel a tremendous amount of group pride for what him and I and our players did. And so I thought it was really important because we had created continuity. We had created a culture and a tradition of how we do things, which is, frankly, really hard. I mean, it's really hard to do. And we had created those things. It's really hard to maintain, truthfully. But we had done that. And I think our program, above and beyond any of us individually, our program deserved to have that continue. And I told the same thing to our players when I had to tell them in a really difficult conversation, with Cal and Jeff Blair, I think, was with us. I said in that room, and I would have said it in private just as much in public, like, he deserved it and he should get it. And I think, Jeff and Sandy and the school made the right decision to give it to him. And I honestly don't think there was really any other. I think they were always going to do that because Kelly had that much respect internally and had earned that place. But for me personally, I'm really proud to be a part of the program, and hopefully they consider me a part of it forever. But, to be a part of it and to continue to support and obviously be there for Kelly in any way I can, but most especially just proud of what he and I and our players accomplished.
Two obviously had a great bond between each other. You've referenced it a couple of times that this previous night before this, you went back and watched bits and pieces, if not all, of some of those championship games. Lasting thoughts from each of you, just in reflecting back into this time in history in ODU basketball.
I caught myself a lot during the stuff yesterday, just like how much time we spent together with the team, with the guys, just us two watching film. Just like everything I saw on film, it's like how many minutes, hours, days, weeks went into. We only watched 60 minutes of gameplay or whatever we watched last night, but just like all the time that went into those 60 minutes that we watched last night, it was just like a trip down memory lane, and the good, the bad, the ups and downs, the joyous, the hills, the valleys. I just caught myself so many times last night. It's like, man, me and this dude spent so much time together. Not always great, not always like perfect, but like we spent so many good moments and growth. And like, it was a big part of my growth. My 20s, a huge part of my 24 to 29 was with this guy, and just all those moments added up. And I mean, he was a big part of shaping me who I am today and where I'm at today. So I caught myself a lot last night, just like reminiscing about like, and now he's 8 hours away. So it's like, it's weird that we together every day for 5 straight years. And now he's 4 states south of us or whatever it is. So I caught myself reminiscing a lot about that last night.
It was, I hadn't watched really any of that, to be honest. And so it was unique to see that. And honestly, one thing, we were just playing at a really high level. We're playing the eventual national champions and, just a week or so after what we're talking about. And like, we were really good. They were better than us on that day, but like, we were really good. And so that stuck out to me. And the other thing is, and I'm a pretty sort of sappy or in tune emotional person. I think, and Kelly would admit that way more than maybe some other people. And just the amount of appreciation for the people we got to do it with, because in the moment we all have the frustrations and the uncertainties and the, why doesn't he do this different? And why doesn't he do that different? And, why won't Kelly talk to me in the office? And, and so we have those moments, right? And it's like, when you look back on it, one of the things that we all, I think, did a really good job of is allowing each other to be ourselves and just to do it within a team structure. And the reason I think we were so loose, like we had sort of mentioned, is that I think we just had fostered an environment where we could all be who we were and bring our own personality, but it was still loving, caring, focused place. And so Kel and I and Hooley in particular, the three of us in particular, had spent years together. And for me, I was a young coach, and I felt like I grew up a ton. Kelly was sort of in the stage sort of right behind me, and he grew up a ton. And Hooley was in the stage right behind him, and he grew up a ton. And then we had Patrick Soderman that year, and Kenny Madison and Amada Jami, and people that had been in it. And it was like at that point and in that experience, and last night watching it, it's like, it's kind of amazing to see where everybody is now, sprinkled all over the country, but also in such good places in their lives and just really incredible people. And that's not even to touch on our players, who I think, are incredible and also into different stages of their lives.
I'm in a great position here where I get to be around so many good people here at ODU and to be around the two of you. But Dan, I'm going to be completely honest. If I was to use a word to describe you, sappy never would have been a word I would have used.
It's a behind the scenes.
He's got it. He's got it. That's for sure.
It's the feel. It's I can't have it on my sleeve all the time.
He's got
but
it.
I promise. I hug. That's what I like to say. I hug.
Coaches, it was a fun time sitting down, talking with the both of you and reminiscing about these times. Hopefully people at home enjoyed some of the behind the scenes stories and how the program has gotten to where it is, and wish nothing but both of you the success moving forward.
Thanks for having us, Todd Bell.
Thanks, Todd.
Thanks for being with us for yet another Panthers Classic interview. You can see more of these interviews by going to our YouTube page and search Ohio Dominican Athletics. My thanks to Dan Evans and Kelly Winter for being with us today. This is Todd Bell. Thanks for watching. And remember, it's always a great day to be a Panther.